A few years ago, in a big city, lived Emeka Obi, a tall, chocolate-skinned, handsome man in his early 30s. He had a low cut, large dark eyes, a pointed nose, and a goatee. Emeka was the kind of guy you could trust with anything, including your life if it came to that. He was one of the few good ones still left in the city. However, Emeka had one problem. Despite all of his goodwill, Emeka was broke. He was one of those good people whom things seemed to never work for. It was that bad, and it did not help that Emeka was one of the most hardworking hustlers out there. He was always looking for something to put his energy into. However, nothing paid back his efforts. He was 30 years old, and yet he still lived in his parents' house and still relied on them. He did get some little income from here and there, but it was never enough to sustain him on his own. Rather, it just served to help the family's resources. Not that this was bad. It was actually the one thing, except for his civil engineering degree, that Emeka could be completely proud of. But the worst part was that everyone had always said Emeka had the potential to be great. He was even the senior prefect in his secondary school and class rep in his university days, eventually graduating with second-class upper. Yet, for some reason, all of these things were yet to translate into success in his life, despite his struggles. And Emeka was really struggling. So much so that people around him were shocked he hadn't given up. However, he always maintained an optimistic outlook, believing that his time would come because truly, he needed to make that money. One evening, as Emeka returned home from his daily hustle, he met his mom outside the 3-bedroom bungalow they lived in with his siblings and father. She looked petite, but heavy, with stretch marks of age showing on her arms. She was still pretty, light-skinned in complexion, with a faded green scarf tied over her slightly graying hair. She was tying a blue and orange wrapper over a light blue sleeveless top and red slippers while using a small cutlass to cut down some logs of firewood into smaller pieces. "Ah, Mama," he called loudly, dropping his bag and coming to her aid. She stood up straight and squinted her small eyes before she turned fully to smile gently at him while readying her wrapper. "How was your day, my boy?" she asked softly with that motherly smile. "Leave my day first, Mama. I've told you to stop cutting this firewood by yourself." "What is Chima doing?" he said angrily, taking the cutlass from her hands. She smiled tiredly. "He's not around, my son," she replied gently. "Where did he go?" he huffed, splitting the log in one go. "He said that his department had an important meeting with their HOD. So that's where he went," she replied calmly. "And Ada?" he asked, straining as he cut the pieces for her. "Ada is not yet back from school, my boy. Take it easy," she replied with concern. "I'm fine, Mama," Emeka assured, with a quick smile, and she relaxed, stretching her waist. By this time?" he asked worriedly, flexing his shoulders before he continued working again. "She said that they are doing after-school lessons for their exams," his mother replied gently. "Okay," he huffed, splitting the last set. Then he stood upright and stretched, before digging his hand in his pocket and giving his mom some money. "Ah, my son, you should keep this for yourself," she urged lovingly, trying to return the money to him. But he wasn't having it. "No, Mama, it's for you, it's for the family," Emeka insisted respectfully, gathering up some of the pieces of firewood. She finally accepted. "By the way, Precious came by," she said with a sigh. Emeka groaned. "What did she want?" he asked tiredly. "What else, you?" his mother replied matter-of-factly. Just then, his father came into the compound, before Emeka could reply to her. His father was bidding someone farewell as he came in. He looked like an older gentleman, in a dark blue short-sleeved senator, and black shoes. He was tall, still looked a bit able-bodied, bald, and carried a clean shave. He had large dark eyes and a prominent nose. He looked like a much older Emeka. You could immediately tell they were father and son. Even though Emeka had inherited his mother's lighter skin complexion, His father was much darker. "Papa, welcome," Emeka greeted respectfully, while carrying the firewood to the back of the house. "Thank you, my son," he smiled warmly, as he approached his wife and son. "When you drop the firewood, come and meet me in my room," he added with a note of seriousness. "All right, sir," Emeka replied quickly on his way, but as he turned, his face carried a note of worry, as he wondered what his father wanted to speak to him about. "Everything all right?" Mrs. Obi asked her husband in a lowered voice, but he just smiled reassuringly and rubbed her shoulder. "Please come and serve me something to eat. I am famished," he spoke gently, then walked past, going into the house. Emeka's mother's face exposed that she was a bit worried about her husband's behavior, but she didn't say anything and just followed him into the house regardless. Mr. Obi walked into the home and went straight to his room, while Mrs. Obi went to the kitchen, where she found Emeka, who had just come in through the back and was now dishing some food for himself. "My son," she called gently, "go and meet your father. I will dish food for both of you. I think the reason why he called you is urgent," she added softly. "Did he tell you what he wanted to talk about?" Emeka asked. His hushed tone showed that he was slightly worried. "No, he didn't," she replied, failing to hide the worry in her own voice. Now they both knew this was serious. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing," Emeka reassured her calmly. With the words, he so wanted to hear himself, and left for his father's room. "Father, you asked to see me," Emeka said, announcing himself as he walked into the room. "Yes, my son," his father replied calmly. He changed into a single wrapper tied around his waist, leaving his chest bare. "Come and sit with me," he added with a fatherly smile, and Emeka obliged. "Is there any problem, father?" Emeka asked. "Did something happen at work?" He pressed gently, the worry etched across his face. "Oh no, work is fine. I wanted to talk about you, my son," he said calmly and placed a hand on Emeka's shoulder, then sighed. Emeka fell short of words, saddened. He always knew that if things didn't improve for him, something like this would happen someday. However, uncertainty stretched across his face, because he had no idea what his father was going to say. However, looking at his father's face, he could tell that he was struggling to speak as well. But Emeka could not tell if that was a good or a bad sign. Mr. Obi sighed. "You're not getting younger, my son," he said gently, "and things are not looking very good for you right now. What if you go back to the village and start something up there?" Emeka's face was getting sadder as his father progressed, but he did not interrupt him. "Maybe a farm or poultry," Mr. Obi suggested nervously, already taking note of the changes in Emeka's features, but he continued regardless. He knew he had to. "I'm sure that there are some opportunities for you to explore there," he completed and exhaled deeply. Even he could feel the weight of the tension in the room at that moment. A knife would cut through. Back to the village? But I can't go back to the village now, father," he answered, pleading with not just his words, but his eyes and hands as well. "The opportunities are here in the city, not in the village," he added, glancing around the room, while he raked his brain for points to support his case. His father had caught him completely off guard with his suggestion. "Besides," Emeka began, his eyes lighting up at the thought, "I think I'm making a headway on some of my investments. Just give me a little time, father, and I promise you I will show you some results," he finished with a smile, hoping that he had convinced his father. But his father's next words halved that confident smile rather quickly. "Emeka, you're 30 years old," Mr. Obi said gently. You could see from his face that the last thing he wanted to do was to hurt his son. But he also knew he had to speak up as his father. "What time are you talking about?" he added sadly. Emeka was hurt by those words, but he struggled to hide his feelings. "Just a few months, Papa," he assured, his smile faltering a bit. "I'm sure I'll come up with something," he nodded. His father's brows creased in thought for a short while, as he mused over it, and then he sighed. "Let's do something," he said wisely. "If in the next 3 months you don't have anything tangible, we'll start arranging for you to go to the village and try something up there. What do you say?" Emeka knew that once his father had stuck his mind on an idea, getting him to change his mind was like expecting lightning to strike the same spot twice. So he sighed, and then with a look of resignation that he hid as quickly as it came, he nodded. "All right, father. I'm sure I'll have something for you," Emeka assured optimistically. "Now let's go and eat, father," he said, and led the way out of the room so that his father could not see the sadness in his eyes. That night, Chima, Emeka's immediate younger brother, got back home late, and Emeka was already lying in his bed when he came in. Chima looked smart. He was currently studying medicine at the university. From a young age, he had always shown a natural brilliance and desire to excel. He was dark-skinned like their father, with his mother's small eyes behind a pair of wire-framed medicated glasses. Average height and with a slim build, he looked like a very calm person, which he actually was, except in school or exams where he displayed his immense brilliance. How Emeka prayed that Chima had a much better life ahead, and never ever ended up like him. Now Chima saw Emeka lying on his back, in bed, his right arm draped across his forehead. "Emeka, is everything okay?" he asked, concern on his face, as he hung his back on the back of the wooden chair placed in front of the reading table by his own bed. "Yes, yes," Emeka quickly assured, sniffing and wiping his face, as he sat up to smile at his immediate younger brother. As he came to sit on the side of the bed closer to him, they both shook hands in their stylish way, and then Chima sat down, facing Emeka. "You know you can trust me, bro. What's up? What happened? Even without my glasses, I can see that you're not happy," he said in his usual calm and soothing way. Emeka sighed, wondering where to start. "Papa talked to me about going back to the village to start something," Emeka confessed sadly. "Ah," Chima exclaimed, his eyes wide in surprise. "Why? Doesn't he know that the best opportunities are here in the city, and not in the village?" "My brother," Emeka sighing tiredly. "You know how father gets once he has an idea. I tried to convince him otherwise, but he's already hellbent on this." He sighed again. "And don't get me wrong, I completely understand his perspective. Things have not gone so well for me, but he gave me 3 months to give him something conclusive, or we'll have to try something different in the village." "Just 3 months?" Chima asked, shocked. "I'm telling you. But don't worry, I'm sure I'll work something out by then," he assured his brother. "I pray you do, bro, and I'll keep looking for any updates in school. If I see or hear anything, I'll let you know." "Thanks, man," Emeka replied. Then they shook hands and bumped shoulders, and the conversation drifted into other topics like school, football, girls, and stuff. 2 months and 3 weeks had passed, and nothing had changed. If anything, it had all become worse. With each passing day, Emeka was losing both hope and sleep. It was worrying to his mom, but he refused to talk about it. Rather, he'd brush off concern by saying he's fine. But he was obviously beginning to lose his optimism and slip into depression. One hot afternoon, during the last week of that month, he was hawking items during a traffic red light stop when the driver of a very beautiful white sports car blew his horn and beckoned at him. He approached, unsure he was the one being called, until the driver rolled down his window and called out to him, "Big Meeks." Emeka instantly recognized that voice. "Paulo," he yelled, shaking hands with his longtime friend. In fact, they had been friends from secondary school and through university. "Ah," Emeka let out, shaking his head. "You guys don't give updates seriously. Look at you, guy. See this car? You're obviously rolling in dough, brother," Emeka exclaimed, while his friend chuckled. "From Paulo, you've become Pablo, this guy." The guy had dreadlocks and a trim beard. He was wearing a pair of stylish glasses. His skin looked well taken care of, and he had expensive jewelry on. He was currently dressed in a jacket over dark trousers. Just then the traffic light turned green, and drivers behind started blaring their horns. "My people, sorry." Emeka started to apologize, waving. "Leave them," his friend said. "Come in, let's drive to somewhere better to talk," he added, and Emeka quickly obliged, joining him in the passenger side. "Would you look at that? The door even goes up to open," Emeka noted, shaking his head in disbelief. But he could never have expected his friend's next words. "This is nothing, wait till you see my house," Paulo replied, stepping hard on the accelerator. Emeka jerked back against his seat as the car zoomed off, and he watched his friend and the classy interior of his car in disbelief. "Where did you get all of this money?" Emeka asked earnestly. "I will tell you, my guy. Just calm," he assured. Paulo drove them to a popular eatery, and Emeka followed him into the building, still dazed and in utter disbelief. "Guy, where did you get all of this money?" he asked again, shaking his head. "Let us eat first," Paulo smiled, leading him to a table for two. He ordered for both of them, and Emeka couldn't believe his eyes when the food arrived. As for the food itself, the taste was out of this world. After they were done eating, the bill came, and Emeka's mouth hung wide. After Paulo paid, and their waiter left them, Emeka whistled. "We just ate, in one sitting, more than double the money than I've ever made in a month." Paulo just chuckled. "You've made me wait long enough, my brother," Emeka insisted. "My guy, I need to show my father something this week or he will send me back to the village, please," he urged. "Ah, that's bad," Paulo admitted, shaking his head. "Exactly. I can't go back to the village, my brother. You have to help me," he begged earnestly. Paulo glanced around and leaned in. "What you need is to pay a visit to the divorced women's market," he said with all seriousness. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Emeka burst into laughter. "My brother, which one is dash?" He paused, glanced around, and leaned in too. "Divorced women's market again? You're not ready," Paulo said smugly, about to get up. But Emeka hurriedly held him and pleaded that he should calm down. "I thought you were joking when you said it, that's all. Explain to me. I'm all ears," he pleaded once more. "Not here," Paulo replied. "Come to my house tomorrow, at any time convenient to you. I will be waiting," he added. "My brother, I hope this thing is not ritual or secret society something," Emeka pressed. "Come on, don't you trust me?" Paulo asked. "To show you I'm on your side here, type your account number and bank," he said, giving him his phone. Emeka did and handed the phone back to him. Then Paulo performed the transaction. Emeka's phone beeped, he checked, and immediately gasped. 100,000? He yelled, hands on his head. "Calm down, it's nothing," Paulo said. "You ain't seen nothing yet. Just come to my place tomorrow. For your transport fare here," he said, putting his hand into his pocket. He brought out a thick wad of thousands and handed it to Emeka. Emeka was still dazed by the transfer, and this was the cherry on top. "I swear I'm in, Paulo," he spoke up, finally finding his words. "Count me in," he reiterated. "It's fine. We'll see," Paulo replied, getting up. They both shook hands and bumped shoulders. "Paulo," Emeka hailed again. "It's nothing, my guy," he replied. Then they exchanged numbers and he left. Emeka watched him leave and then exhaled deeply, looking down at the fat wad of cash. He couldn't believe his eyes. A waitress came to clear the table then. "Any tips?" she asked. Emeka shook his head. "With this money in my hand, I have become visible. Women He hissed and rushed to collect his wares from Paolo's car. That evening, when Emeka got home, everyone was around. In fact, they heard him whistling as he came in. Ada was the first to spot him through the window of her room. She spied the goodies in his hands and immediately rushed out of her room, running to meet him outside. She was the fairest of them all, average height like Chima, and very pretty. Her adolescent age was looking beautiful on her. "Welcome, brother," she said, smiling warmly. "Did you get a job?" "Sure. Lower your voice before others know I'm back." He hushed her. "Are Mom and Dad around?" he asked. "Yes, they are," she replied. "Okay." He nodded. "Let me go and see them. I'll be back," he assured her fervently. Emeka went in and showed his parents the goodies. His mother spoke up first. "Emeka, where did you get the money to get all these things? Did you get a contract?" "My son, where did you get all this money?" Mr. Obi asked sternly. "I met an old friend of mine, father. He said he was going to teach me business. He was the one that gave me the money to buy these things, and he said that I should come tomorrow, and he would teach me the business." "Which friend is that? And which business is that?" Mr. Obi pressed. "Paolo," Emeka reported, smiling. "We went to secondary school and even university together." "Paolo gave you money for these?" his mother asked, shocked. "Yes, Ma," Emeka replied, nodding. "You know the boy?" his father asked, his eyes wide in surprise. "Yes, I know him," Mama Emeka smiled back. "Paolo that used to come back with Emeka every now and then. Of course, I know him. I remember him as a good boy, but we'll still pray over everything because you never know." "Exactly," Papa Emeka replied. "Besides, what business did your friend say he is into?" "He's a businessman, sir. He visits one market like that, buys wares and sells them off." Emeka spoke swiftly, covering up for Paolo to avoid too many questions. "All right, my son. May God be with you tomorrow, so that everything goes well." "Amen, Father," Emeka replied. "Now, Mama, let us pray over these things now. I'm sure my siblings will be waiting for them earnestly." "Let them wait," she responded. "Where were they dying when I asked them to fetch water and to clean this house? Let them wait." "Okay, Ma," Emeka conceded, getting up. After they said the prayers and everything, they shared the goodies amongst themselves and made quick work of it. Later that night, while in their room, Emeka was discussing with Chima about Paolo. "If you see the car this guy was driving, bro," Emeka said, while lying face up on his bed, with one arm resting across his forehead. "One of these mad sports cars, the latest model. And the way he was so free with the money shows that he's got loads. I can't wait to go see him tomorrow. Things are finally looking up, bro. I'm happy for you. Don't make that money and run away from us just like that though," he said with a concerned look on his face. How can you even say that? You know me, brother," Emeka assured, sitting up. "I'm just saying because Paolo, your friend, was nowhere to be seen until now. And I don't think that money entered his hands just yesterday," Chima said wisely. "However Paolo did with his people is his problem. I promise that no matter what, I'm not leaving you guys. Even if I become the richest man in the world, I will never abandon you guys," Emeka assured him with all conviction. That night Emeka was the last to fall asleep and the first to wake the next morning. And he woke up in such a great mood. He did all the chores and prepared breakfast for everyone. He even played a bit with Ada, tickling her a bit as she came out for breakfast. Emeka's mood was very infectious, and everyone came out looking brighter and happier. Mr. Obi led the family prayers before the meal, and he didn't forget to include Emeka's new job, to which Emeka replied with a hearty, "Amen." The food was even more delicious with the job on his mind, and after the meal, he cleared and washed all the plates. Then everyone left except Mrs. Obi and Emeka, who quickly began to prepare for his meeting with Paulo. He dressed in a neat dress shirt, chinos, and sandals he'd bought using some of the money that Paulo had given him. Once he was ready, he announced to his mother that he was leaving. Then she hugged him dearly to her bosom, smiling with the joy of motherhood. "Go well, my son," she said kindly. "I will, Mama," he replied gently, then kissed her forehead and left. As he came out of the gate, he saw someone waiting for him, a dark, tall, and pretty girl. She looked confident, like she would always stand for what she wanted. "Sweetie," she smiled, rubbing his shoulder. "You're shining, my dear. Don't forget your girlfriend." Yes, she was his self-proclaimed girlfriend. "Please, precious, not today. I have an important meeting I'm on my way to attend," Emeka said dismissively. "It's like you have seen money, fine boy. This one you're treating me like this. You're my man. Don't forget me." "It's all right, precious, I have to go," Emeka insisted and left quickly, while Precious went to report him to his mother. When Emeka got to Paulo's place, he frankly thought that the place was a hotel. At the gate, the attendant had to call the house to confirm him before he was let through. The compound was massive, and there were so many exquisite cars that he could not believe his eyes. Paulo came out to meet him in a pair of expensive matching polo and shorts with slides. He had 2 glasses and a very expensive bottle of wine. "Paulo," Emeka exclaimed, looking around. "Paulo, how?" He repeated, his hands on his head. He was still in shock. "Big Meeks. Come, let's talk." Paulo smiled, leading him to some seats on one side of the house. "So, what are you saying about the divorced women's market?" Emeka asked earnestly. Paulo handed him his glass and popped the bottle of wine. "Okay, the divorced women's market is a place all the billionaires go to get the source of their wealth," he said, pouring them both some wine. "How does it work?" Emeka asked, leaning in. The readiness to learn was written all over his face. "You will have to see it yourself. We're going to leave tonight at 9, Paulo replied, smiling. 9? What do you mean 9? I don't know any major market that opens at 10 at night, Emeka replied. Uncertainty and worry etched across his face. It's a night market. That's the thing. It opens at 10, but we'll leave at 9. To get there early, Paulo assured him calmly. Are you sure that this thing is not something secret cult or ritual related, Paulo? Emeka asked, voicing out his worries. It's not, my guy, Paulo replied, looking offended. Do I look like a cultist to you? Trust me, I'll explain when we get there. But you have to keep this to yourself. Let the update not become a normal thing for everyone. It will lose its charm, he added with a serious note. What do I now tell my people? Emeka asked, his face clearly displaying his confused state. Tell them we're going on a trip, Paolo replied offhandedly. I don't like lying to them, Emeka replied, looking a bit hurt. But you're not lying to anybody, Paolo corrected. We're going on a trip and we'll take my chopper. It's at the back of the house, he added unconcernedly. Emeka sat back and looked at Paolo. Just when he thought he had seen it all, he'd suddenly do something to shock him even more. He just shook his head and looked around more. How did this guy come into this wealth, he wondered. What was this business? He glanced at Paolo once more. He didn't give off any illegal vibe unless he hid it well. But then he sat there wondering, what if it was illegal? Would he be able to summon the courage to resist? He really needed the money and the update. He was very desperate. How was he going to handle such a situation? He wondered. Just then, they were interrupted by a beautiful lady. She looked to be in her middle 30s, but she was visually stunning. She had long curly hair and dark glowing skin. She was wearing a dark green jumpsuit and silver slippers. Sweetheart, what do you want for lunch? She asked Paolo, then noticed Emeka. Good afternoon, Ma, he greeted, unable to hide the confusion in his face and in his voice. This is my wife, Sophia. Paolo introduced her calmly, his hand resting on her sumptuous behind. Sophia, this is my friend I told you about, Emeka. Just get us something good. I trust you. They shared a light kiss, and she left. Wife? How? Emeka asked, even more confused if that was possible. Since when are you married? How come I never heard? With all this money, your wedding must have been a splash. Paolo was just smiling as Emeka was speaking. My brother, that woman you see there, is the source of all my wealth, he said matter-of-factly. Sugar mummy? Emeka asked, his eyes wide. No. I got her from the divorced women's market. I was lucky with her, Paolo replied calmly, relaxing in his seat. My guy, to be very honest, my head is paining me at this point, Emeka confessed, rubbing his head. I am very confused at this point. First, you said that I have to visit the divorced women's market. Then you said that that's where all the rich men go to get their money. Next you say we're going to travel to it tonight because it's a night market, and now I find out you're married to an older woman, and you claim that she is the source of your wealth. Take it easy on me, guy. This is not engineer's class now, Emeka expressed profusely. You still remember that teacher? Paolo laughed heartily. Who can forget such a person? Emeka asked in reply. But explain these things to me now, Chief. I've told you more than I can tell a non-member, my brother. But you saw my wife, apart from her being older, which to me is not even a problem. Did you notice anything strange? Trust me, you'll find out more in time. Emeka nodded repeatedly and then sighed. It's fine. I'll wait and see what happens. Let me go and call my people to inform them of our trip, he said, getting up. All right. Greet your mom for me too, Paolo said. I'll wait for you. Once you're done, we will go and eat. And then I'll show you the guest room I had prepared for you. You'll need some rest because it's a night journey. Room prepared for me? Emeka asked, eyes wide in surprise. Ha! Whatever you say, Chief, he hailed Paolo as he stepped away. I'm not even sure I'll be sleepy. Oh, you will, Paolo replied, but not to Emeka's hearing. Emeka called his mom, knowing that his dad would probably still be at work at that moment. She took the call on the first ring, but she was not alone. Her self-proclaimed daughter-in-law, Precious, was there too. "Mama, is it my man?" She pressed close to Emeka's mother, who was trying to hide the displeasure on her face. "Precious, wait. Let me speak to my son," she let out, trying not to sound dismissive. "Mom, I won't be coming home tonight. I'm going on a business trip with Paolo to see the market and learn to buy things," he reported, looking at all the beauties of Paolo's compound. "You got the job?" his mother exclaimed joyfully. "Yes," Emeka replied happily, and she began to cry tears of joy. "Did he get the job?" Precious asked, holding on to her clothes. Mrs. Obi nodded, in tears, and Precious exploded, screaming in joy. "Let me talk to him, let me talk to him," she insisted, and despite Mrs. Obi's efforts, she collected it. "My love," she cooed into the phone. "Hello?" Emeka asked. Immediately he heard her voice. "Hello? I'm losing you. I can hear you," Precious yelled repeatedly. Emeka quickly hung up. "Mama, he hung up," Precious complained. "He said it's the network, Precious," Mrs. Obi said, trying to calm her down. "But it didn't cut before," she pressed. At that point, Mrs. Obi just gave up and left her there. Meanwhile, at Paolo's place, Emeka went back to join Paolo. Then they went to eat. After the most amazing and filling lunch Emeka had ever had in the most beautiful dining room he had ever been in, Paolo led him to his suite. Emeka almost went mad with excitement. "Guy, I can't wait to start this business," he admitted excitedly. "Tonight, my guy," Paolo replied, smiling. "Go and lie down for a bit. Remember, it's a night flight." "I don't even feel sleepy at all," Emeka replied, laughing. "Until you lie on that bed. Try it first and check," Paolo replied, laughing too. "A whole big meeks like me?" Emeka asked vibrantly. "Come and watch me," he said, leading Paolo to the room. Immediately he lay on the bed. He had to eat his words. "Paolo," he hailed his friend. "Which kind of magic is this? So soft, so good. It's like the clouds," he admitted happily. He was like a child with a new toy. "Relax," Paolo assured, smiling as he set the AC using its remote. "We'll talk later, Big Meeks," he said. Yeah, Emeka slurred, feeling a sudden sleep overpowering him. This bed was surely something else, he thought to himself as his eyes shut. When Emeka opened his eyes, he was in a dark place. Suddenly a spotlight came on. He was in the middle of a circle of hooded figures. They were chanting a language he couldn't understand. Suddenly, they all pulled out daggers and slit their wrists, all dripping blood that formed a red circle around him. As he spun around trying to understand what was going on, someone suddenly yelled his name, "Emeka!" Immediately he gasped, waking up. He was drenched in sweat. Then he looked out the window. It was nighttime. He wiped his eyes and looked at the alarm clock on the bedside table. Next to him it read 8:30. Paolo said they were leaving by 9. For some reason, a strange fear crept over him as he wondered what he was getting himself into. Thanks for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed the story and would like a part 2, comment part 2 in the comment section and subscribe to the channel so you would be the first to be notified when I drop a new video.